Dave Holmes. Welcome to the Dear Souls podcast.
Uh,
Tell me, what ignites your energy to do what you do on a daily basis?
yeah, I think just the fact that we are here existing at all, there happens to, be just some place for us to play and have these incarnations and, interact with people like you and other people. I mean, it's a short little trip we're on, but might as well make the most of it and have fun, as much fun as we can along the way. You don't get to read you.
Yeah. Nice, nice. I'm right there with you, man. Gotta enjoy life. Now, tell me, can you share the inspiration behind your book, Zen and the Art of Inner Bleaching, a backdoor journey from darkness to light?
Well, sure. And it's not a how-to book. It's a novel. So just so people get the right idea. Uh, I had read There it is. I had read many of the Zen and the art books, right? Obviously, the title is a spoof on like Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance or Zen and the art of archery or whatnot. And I realized that like for Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, it was a deep deconstruction of Western philosophy, but there was a very loose plot, and you really had to slog through a lot of this philosophical stuff, and it didn't really relate to the plot too much. And I've read so many different books about, whether it's Buddhism or non-duality or, every different teacher you can probably imagine. And a lot of it's kind of dry, and it's hard to then translate that into how does that for a contemporary lifestyle, like say in the US or in Europe, how does it really
Uh-huh.
relate? And I just started thinking, well, why can't a philosophical journey, be fun and lighthearted and inappropriate and use dark humor and people can laugh and have a good time reading a story that actually has some content to the story itself. And if they want to be introspective and pull that philosophical aspect of it into self-reflection, they can, but they don't have to, and not have it cloaked in a bunch of dukkha and dharma and these type of Eastern words. And so anyway, I decided, hey, let's write a novel that's set in San Francisco with a up and comer in the high tech world who makes some bad decisions and blows up his life and is trying to figure out how does he reconstruct his life and what that means to him in a way that anyone going through changes in jobs, relationships, whatnot can relate to that. Like, yeah, okay, I get that. I get what he's wrestling with. So
Yeah.
kind of a fresh approach to bring some of that Eastern philosophy and psychology to a Western reader in an enjoyable way.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, when I first started reading the book, I was like, "Who the heck is this guy Toby? What the heck is wrong with him?" Like you got me like really going in there and being like, "Wait a second, is Dave? He's just putting his name as Toby." I mean, trying to figure out. And then when we got into our little pre-interview and you kind of like went over everything, I'm like, "Oh, okay." So some of it's related to your own journey in certain areas. But
Yeah,
then other things you just kind of grab from everyday life and put
yeah.
it into a story. And I was just like, that is fucking fascinating. That's pretty cool, man.
Well, it was a fun process, and as you mentioned, people will ask, "Oh, how much of it's autobiographical or not?" Because it's told in the first person, which if you're reading that, can think, "Oh, okay, is this author? I mean, just telling about his life?" And the answer is no. Bits and pieces of it I've pulled from experiences I've had, funny things that friends have told me about, or that
Uh-huh.
I've come across. Certain aspects of it do mimic my journey of self-discovery, but like what's going on specifically in his life and how the events are unfolding, what those events are is, largely, made up. It's fiction, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you have me glued to my chair, man. I was like, shit, chapter after chapter after chapter. Even this morning, I'm like, I gotta get a few more chapters in before we get in this interview because I want to, have it all fresh up in my head and kind of like, I do that. I like to like just kind of get myself into the story and then connect
right.
with the individual in the interview. So it was kind of fun. It's I love the book. I have never read anything like it so
Well,
far. It's one of my favorites. I mean, I have many favorites, but
yeah, yeah.
the storytelling of it is like it was pretty cool. It gave me a different perspective on how to create even my own story.
Mm.
For like my autobiography that I want to do, my memoir, or just in general in life. Sometimes we need to create like beautiful stories, and how do we do that?
Well,
So you have a very creative mind.
Thanks. I mean, I think when you're having a good time, it's easy to be creative, right? And if you're writing about
Yeah.
something that's lighthearted and that people can relate to, it makes it a little bit easier. And one of the things you hit on, really, the story kind of hits on it well, is the fact that we're storytellers. We tell ourselves stories about who we are to make sense of what's unfolded in our life, and we want to create a story that we can live with, that we don't feel bad
Mm-hmm.
about who we are, that supports, the best aspects of who we hope to be. And we have this fictitious self then that we create through our ideas. Who's Jacqueline? Who's Dave? And people say, hey, tell me about, your life. And you've got this story that you're including the parts that you like, and you're kind of maybe leaving some parts out where we don't particularly want to reflect
Yeah.
on. And and Toby, the protagonist in the book, I mean, his story gets kind of blown up just because of external variables that affect his life, and gets threatened. And how does he react to the fact that his life is not mirroring to him the story that he's always told himself about who he is, and how disconcerting
Mm-hmm.
that can be? And so, in the end, we're also, like you were saying, we're storytellers, right? And how do we
Yeah,
want to tell
that's
those
true.
stories? And how much do we believe those stories?
Yeah, that's true. We tend to believe even the thoughts that come in our heads, and we're like, wait a
Yep.
second, that's not my freaking thought. Where the
Yeah.
hell did that come from?
Yeah. Try not to think anything for a while, and then tell me if you can really control your thoughts. It takes about 4 seconds for one to come flying in, right?
Are you kidding me? Listen, I just came back about a month ago. I was at a 10-day Vipassana retreat, silent retreat. And I never thought in a million years that I would do something like that. I'm like, why would I want to leave for 10 days somewhere and be total silence and not talk to anybody? I like to talk, that's why I'm doing the podcast, right? And, then, and then I'm like, wait a second, but I need to get the hell out of here. I've come through so much in my life. I just need a freaking reset. I just need not to worry about anything for a little bit. And I'll tell you something, man. It was amazing, and it was funny because you have all these thoughts, random thoughts, and that sometimes they don't even make sense. And then as you're learning how to meditate and you're learning how to be still, and you're coming on to day 4 where you have to really sit, like you can't even move. And I always say, well, if you have an itchy culo, an itchy ass, you can't even move. That's my joke. And I'm just like, okay, well, let me go with this, right? Let me tell you, I was able on and off quiet my mind, and it was amazing, and I was able to become the observer of
Hmm.
my thought and not attached to anything, not create any more aversions or nothing. And to me it was like, wow, that is fascinating, and that is such a relief that we could actually do that. We just have to practice. We don't have to sit freaking still for a little while and just let the thoughts be their thoughts. They don't have to be yours. Let it just go. And it was pretty fascinating.
Well, that's that is really fascinating, because you mentioned that you got to a point where you were observing the thought, but like the
Hmm.
thoughts were happening within your awareness, but you were viewing them almost as if you would view, well, the classic metaphor of cloud moving through the sky or whatnot, as opposed to identifying with that thought as being the totality of who you were, right? So
Hmm.
you were able to almost break that identification with being this individual thought constructed Jacqueline, and just observe what was going on. Now, how many days do you suppose it kind of took to get to the point where you were able to make that connection with kind of that witness kind of consciousness versus
Yeah.
in the mind still?
Um, Well, I think it was happening a little bit throughout because the weirdest thing that I found was that the first night that I got there, that was difficult because my husband dropped me off and then he had to drive 7 hours back. So
Oh,
I was
geez.
kind of like, yeah, I was in fear. I was like, it's going to be okay with the dogs. Is it going to get back home safe enough? It's not going to get home to like midnight. I
Is
had
he
all
having
these
too much
thoughts
fun
going.
without me? Those kind of
No, I
thoughts.
didn't even think of that. I was like, I feel so bad that he's got to stay with the dogs for 2 weeks and clean the Airbnb on the weekend, and he's got his own job and all these things going on. And poor guy, I'm
Yeah, I
thinking
almost
like,
feel
I
like
hope
guilty.
he's gonna be okay. Yeah, So, but for me, I think it took a few days. I think I did pretty well, just kind of like going right into it and just being silent and just going in with myself. I've been doing a lot of shadow work for the last year and a half or a little more. And I just, it wasn't as hard as I thought, but I would tell you, day 5 for me was the blissful day. Like I was in total bliss. Like no thoughts could bother me. I was just like Buddha, because actually Buddha was the one that created this technique. It's all about mind and matter, and observing the thoughts. And it's funny, he wanted to get to the root cause of humanity's suffering. So this technique is to free you from your own freaking suffering, to let go
Hmm.
of all the bullshit, you know?
Yeah.
So I think like it on and off, it was there. Like I could, the thoughts were not really, I wasn't attaching to them because I knew I already understood the technique. But the thoughts kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And I'm like, okay, well, just keep coming. And then I found by I think it was day 5 or 6, I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing construction in my head. I started being creative. I'm redesigning my entire house. I'm redesigning the podcast. Oh, my creative mind just activated.
Hmm.
It activated incredibly. And I'm like, holy shit, where's my phone? I need to research on things. And I'm like, oh shit, no phone, because you don't have phone. You're not talking to
Yeah.
anybody. You cannot look at another person that's there. It's like for 10 days, you're done. Like you're by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's some people's worst nightmare. I mean, there's people that don't even like to be
Hmm.
home for an hour alone. I mean, I've got friends that's like,
I was
well,
that person.
yeah, yeah, and I don't even know if the people know for sure why, but they just don't like just having to sit with their thoughts, right? And they want distractions. I
Well,
mean,
of
and so
course not.
I mean, think of how much of our life is distractions. Some of them we have to be distracted by work and things
Yeah.
that pay our rent and all. But any spare time we get, we're watching Netflix, we're reading novels, we're on our phone. We're standing in line at
Yeah.
the grocery store, and we've got like 30 seconds, so we're immediately popping up our phone or checking a news feed or something like that. There's this.
Hmm.
I have to be distracted constantly, as opposed to just can I just sit and watch myself or be with myself and see what's there or not there.
Yeah. No, and like you said, it's very hard. I know I was guilty of that my entire life. I could not be alone for the life of me. And, I would drive my husband crazy. And now he's like, you want to be on your own? I'm like, yeah, I need my free time, dude. Like go do your own thing, So he goes to play softball or something, or I might go for a drive. And he's like, who's this little woman? Because he calls me his little woman. And I'm like, you know what? I found my freedom. I found who I am. I just found this thing where I don't have to be attached to anything or anybody, not including my son and my grandkids,
Mhm.
which my son takes that very offensive. He don't understand the detachment of things, which is okay. He's gonna get there. But for me it's like so fascinating that I'm like, why didn't I discover this shit sooner? I would have suffered so much less in my life.
Well, the attachment thing that you mentioned, like Buddha, says, is the cause of suffering. And I think in the
Yeah.
West, if we've been even lightly exposed to any sort of Buddhist psychology, you think, okay, attachment means I'm attached to this house or being famous or having a certain amount of money or a car. We think of it as external material type of things, right? And
Uh-huh.
whereas I think that we often overlook there's so much internal attachments to ideas, concepts, and beliefs, especially about who we are. And when
Uh-huh.
those beliefs get threatened, or uh, our self-image gets threatened in some way, shape, or form, that causes us this internal suffering. I'm feeling shame. I'm feeling embarrassment. I want to be liked, and I'm getting feedback that people don't like me. So there's all these internal thought-based
Yeah.
attachments that cause so much suffering, and not not always are people talking about that when they talk about attachment, right? But I think it's
Right.
important to understand that. And that's one of the things in the book that Toby definitely goes through, and Eddie helps to kind of point him into the certain directions to look
Mm-hmm.
and examine himself along the way. So it is an internal journey, but it as opposed to just purely externally, I'm not attached anymore to having a nice house and I'm free. I mean, it's not necessarily how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, no, and that's really what I loved about one of the parts about the story was that Toby was he had detached from all of that, and in his world he was happy. Being a homeless, being out there. He had his best friend Cowboy. It's like he was okay with life, and the advices, even the book. He's like, go read, what is it, Ram Dass or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like go read that book and go and give you so many different philosophies or ideas or thoughts. And I'm just like, man, we as human beings, we take for granted even the people that we see homeless, and we don't know their story. We don't know what got them there. We don't know how wise they are. You know what I mean? And we think, oh, they're just crazy, or they're stinky, or whatever the heck. As human
Yeah.
beings, we tend to look, look at. And when we see someone that's homeless, and I'm just like, you know what? They're just human beings on a journey, and you know what? Sometimes people just say, I'm done with having to pay taxes, paying the house, paying all these bills. Screw that shit. I'm just going to go live in the street because it's so much easier. I'd
Right.
rather deal with the bad weather, the rain, all these things, but I'm happy. So at the end of the day, happiness is what counts, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think that, and being able to be happy if what makes you happy doesn't conform to our cultural beliefs about what happiness should be, right? I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
we tend to see a homeless person and think, that person just made some bad choices. Well, some people never had any good choices available to pick from, too,
Yeah.
and that's that's something that oftentimes is not the first thing that comes to mind. We like to believe that everybody has a choice, and whereas not everybody really has as many options and advantages as you or I might have had throughout our journey. And Eddie in the book
Yeah.
is based upon he's a homeless gentleman, and he's based upon a homeless gentleman that I knew that lived in my neighborhood in San Francisco. And
Okay.
in real life, he had a dog named Cowboy, and I'd carry my stuff down to the laundromat, and I have to wait for 40 minutes or whatever for the dryer cycle. And yeah, Eddie would have his little
Mm-hmm.
cart and his tarp, and he'd be sitting there with Cowboy, and I'd go, okay, what the hell? I'll go across to the corner market and get him a beer and get me a beer, and you know, chat with the guy, right? And
Yeah.
he was rather remarkable just because, to your point, he was homeless by choice. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't like the idea of having all the responsibility and having for traditional American lifestyle. And I I kind of thought to myself, well, that's really interesting. I wonder how he kind of got to that point. And we started talking, and he grew up in a very abusive household. His dad was an alcoholic, and he was beaten and everything else. And then he eventually got old enough to get a job, and he was working on the piers, unloading ships and stuff. And
Uh-huh.
which is a tough freaking life in and of itself. And then he
Right.
got drafted into Vietnam, and he went through the basic training and all, and was and he said for the first time there was other people that depended on me, and I depended on them, and they didn't
Uh-huh.
care too much what my background was, and I felt like I was a part of something greater than me, and I'd never had real family to give me that feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
and then he said one night, there was 22 of them in his unit or platoon. I'm not sure what the right terminology is, that had to crawl through a minefield. And he said
Yeah. That
only
was really impactful.
yeah, so that was true. And that whole backstory of Eddie was true. And all of them died except two of them, one of which was him. And he said it got me thinking, wow, these people had some children, they had fiancés, they had families that loved
Yeah.
them, they had so much to go back to, and I had nothing. And he said,
Mm.
now, I wake up, and Dave, and I'll look at my hand and I'll move my hand, and I feel so much gratitude and so lucky just to be still having this experience of being a human being for however brief it is. Wow, this is a guy by all our standards has nothing, and yet
Mm-hmm.
he is living with the understanding that he has everything and more, and feels grateful, and that stuck with me for years and years. And so I lost touch with him. He moved out of the neighborhood or something one day, and was just kind of gone. But I really wanted to feature him as a character in the book, just because he made a big difference in helping to open my eyes to looking at things from very different perspectives.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful. Yeah, when I was reading that story, and he was, you had written there that he was crawling through dead bodies and all those things. I was just like, a lot of our veterans go through things that we don't know.
No
There's
idea.
a lot of
Yeah.
things that we don't know that happens in the military. And my son and my husband, they're both former military, and
Sure.
I've seen what the military did to my son. And thank
Sure.
God he's okay, but he's got a lot of trauma that he needs to work through. And to me, it really sucks that our government doesn't. And I don't care if I say this, but our government really doesn't care. They don't give a shit.
Yeah.
They'll give you a paycheck, they'll give you some VA this and some, some discounts over here and there, but where's the mental health? Where is the part of the PTSD that these people, gather and gain through their experiences of war or whatever they're going through there, that, our governments are really not doing nothing. They're not doing much. We could help these people. These people could actually be healthier mentally.
Hmm.
They could have a better lifestyle. And if they choose to be homeless at that point, that's on them.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Whatever you want to do, it's your life, it's your experience. Whatever you want to do, it's great. But for me, mental health, it's big. I myself suffered through, the severe depressions and anxiety and panic attacks. I had my own traumas and stuff. And it breaks my heart. It really does, to see people that you want to help, but some of them are just far gone.
Yes,
It's really hard.
it is hard. I mean, these people have made such big sacrifices, and I was at a fundraiser a month or so ago by a Blue Angel Foundation, and some
Okay.
people that had been in the military, been in the Air Force, and actually did spend some time and being part of the Blue Angel, created this foundation, and it was to help people from the military, especially people
Uh,
that have been injured and and immediately discharged, to reintegrate into society. And the analogy that one of them gave was interesting. It said, suppose you're on a college football team, right? And your whole life is about that. And you're training with people and you got the games that you're playing in together to accomplish this goal. And these people are like your brothers and you're there for each other. And it's all about what is your life right now. And suddenly you lose a leg and boom, you're boom out of that. All those people gone.
yeah.
It's all gone. And you're back sitting on a couch figuring out, how do I put my life together? The mental trauma of that. And so, anyway, that organization was raising money to really help those people reintegrate back into life after having had that experience.
Nice.
And which, yeah, obviously is good and helpful. But to your point, it's just a relatively small organization. I mean, and how many thousands and thousands and thousands of people are trying to reconstruct their lives and make sense of all this. And then, of course, there's the families of the people that are lost, and
Yeah.
the sacrifices those families make, not just the individual themselves for the sake of the country. And I think it's got to be really hard for these people to come back and then reconcile meaning out of all this in a way that makes sense and is positive, that they can feel good about who they are and feel good about our country.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Hopefully things will get better in the next, 10, 20 years. We'll see changes. I'm very hopeful that things are
Yeah,
going to get better.
hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Hopefully, hopefully. So, how did your experience in Silicon Valley shape the narrative and the themes in your writing?
That's a good question. I've spent 16 years or so working in Silicon Valley, um, and I worked on the sales side, not as a sales rep, but as an operational person. So I would manage kind of our global sales operations. That's all the systems that people use to forecast, the training, the order management, that type of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the structure behind it, so to speak. And I really got, again, a firsthand view of, okay, what is that lifestyle like? I mean, it's hard with respect to the amount of hours you put in, how fast things
Mm-hmm.
change. You can have a plan for the year, a 3-year plan, but every quarter, things change so rapidly with the competition and all. Things are constantly blown up, and you're reacting, and you're grinding your
Yeah.
teeth, and they're putting in a ton of hours, and you're trying to get to the next level, because whatever reason, not everybody is, but I mean, most people are. They're really
Yeah.
trying to climb up the ladder to become a director or
Yeah.
a VP, for ego-related reasons, or maybe just because they really love it. However,
It's the rat race, man.
oh,
Yeah, it's the rat race. It's how we've been programmed.
yeah, it's like the typical rat race that so many of us experience, but it's like on steroids almost, right? And
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and it's a bubble to some degree too, because people get paid pretty well in high tech, and you're oftentimes working on cool projects and all. And in some ways, it makes it easier to lose touch with what's the typical person out there struggling with, and all, and become maybe a little less sensitive. At least for me, I found that to some degree. And eventually, it got to the point. It's like, do I really want to just to wake up and then immediately a list of things that are potentially horrific that I need to solve that day? Is from the moment I'm drinking my coffee in my mind until I check and click on the last email before I go to bed at 11 o'clock that night. And for me, I realized that wasn't a way to live, in a compassionate and a centered type of way, and be able to be
Right.
there for the people that I really care about, mentally and emotionally, and all. So at the beginning of the book, when I'm describing his professional life, it was able to kind of pull that from the experiences that I had had. So that's how it impacted, the book and the setup of the book.
That's pretty cool. That it's funny because when I refer back to Toby in that high end crazy world, and then he got let go because of him and his friend just you know watching porn and all these crazy things. I'm like, that's really like your typical stereotype, because I've been in corporate, I've been in sales,
Okay.
I did timeshares. I sold cars. So, I was always the girl hanging out with the guys. So I kind of always seen things like that. And I was just always like shaking my head, like, why? Like, and they're like, well, we're bored. There's nothing really else to do. We got to keep ourselves entertained. It was kind of like always pretty much the answer back. And I was like, well, okay, that makes sense, but can you find something more interesting or different? And they're like, no, because we're stuck here like 12, 14 hours a day. So we got to keep our minds like, and I was like, okay, no big deal. That's just how it is. So that right there really got me. I'm like, that is so like really typical in corporate America.
Well, it is funny. A friend of mine had lost his job, and I wasn't aware of the details of it, but he was reading the book, and he said, "Hey, did I tell you my story? Is that where you pulled that from?" He goes, "It's exactly what happened.
Mhm.
Me and a buddy were exchanging, seeing who could outdo each other with the most offensive stuff. That of course, you were emailing or just back and forth, and someone walked in someone's cube or something and sees it. Next thing you know, we're fired." And it's like, holy,
Yeah.
and I was like, "No, I didn't know it. I didn't know the details of your story, but I bet you it's not all too uncommon."
Yeah. Yeah. It's not. It's really not that uncommon. Especially as a former bartender too, because I bartended and I heard so many stories.
Oh,
They
I
were
bet you heard it,
crazy.
seen it all.
Oh my God, you kidding me? I was like the psychologist, the priest, the everything for everyone. Oh, so Dave, how do you balance that witty comedy with serious philosophical undertones in your work? Because I know that, you have the philosophy and,
Well,
it's serious and all these things, but then you put that witty comedy into it. I'm like, I love it.
it's kind of a challenge, right? Because there's two things that are happening in the book. There's these ridiculous situations he finds himself in, and and the funny characters that he's interacting with, and on. So it's easy to create humor and lighthearted, funny situations that are off the wall. But then there's his internal journey that's going on too, and really that his conversations with Eddie, from time to time, are what then they evolve into some discussions about some philosophical and psychological underpinnings of what we are. And they'll argue
Hmm.
or kind of debate, and Toby will resist this and that. But then I have to say, okay, what's then the next experience Toby's having that somehow relates to that? So in the experience, you can kind of think about it a little bit, and anchor it in what's happening, and yet not have too much philosophical stuff that slows the story or the momentum down, and can cause a reader to punch out, right? And so
Right.
that was challenging. That was challenging. I really had to think a lot about that, create like little maps to myself, saying, okay, here's these things that were discussed or briefly mentioned with Eddie. Where does Toby contemplate that, or does it come up again? Or I don't want all these little things just thrown out there and then that's it. It doesn't really relate to the story at all. So it was
Right.
kind of hard to try to get that balance, but I think it worked out pretty good in the end.
I think so too. How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me 2.5 years, but that doesn't mean that's how long it takes to write a book. That just means it's how long
No, I know.
it took
I
me
know.
to figure out how to write a book, because I hadn't written anything before, right? And so I'm
Hmm.
writing, and then I'm doing online writing mystery academy classes, and then realizing, oh, here's these key 13 beats that usually good screenplays or stories or books tend to have in common at different points along the way. And I've got 4 of them and that's it. Oh, I better go back and rewrite this. Or then you get done with the
Oh shit.
first draft and you're like, okay, I know I've got to revise this to some degree. And then I take some online kind of course about how to revise your novel. And it's so valuable at the story level, the scene level, but it's so humbling because you realize, key components to scenes that make them effective. I don't have 6 of those 12. I better rethink this scene. So I was kind of writing and learning to write and then doing a lot of rewriting with that new knowledge. And that's why I think it took so long. And I'd write for an hour or 2 a day. And then after I'd finished a draft or a revision, then I'd do nothing for 30 days because I was working at my courage to go back and see what needed to happen next, right? So,
Right.
but I've got friends
Well,
around. But
yeah, no, I could actually see the details. I could see that it was really well written. And like I told you in our pre podcast interview, I was like, have you thought of doing like a series or something, like to put it on Netflix or something? Because it's really a story. Like
yeah,
I could just see the characters actually happening, and I'm like, I will watch it.
yeah, I think it would
I
be.
think it's funny.
It would be entertaining, definitely. I mean, the goal was to really create a story that carried itself on the merits of kind of the story and the characters alone, and then have the philosophical journey woven into that, as opposed to here's all this
Mhm.
philosophical dump with a sad excuse for a story kind of masquerading as scaffolding to hold it together. And so I really did want to work on the story to the best I could to have it be something that people enjoyed following. And there's some little bit of depth to it, a little depth to the characters, and you feel like you could relate to the characters or the scenes and all. So
That's pretty cool. I'm gonna have to, give you a call and be like, hey, I need your help when I'm writing my memoir
cool.
because you've already gone through all the headache. I'm like, how do you do this? Because I know I wrote that little book over there, but that was not that hard for me
Yeah.
because I just had thoughts coming in like downloads, and then I'll just type things into AI, and I'm like, okay, give me examples of this, and what does this mean, and can we put this together? So AI was like my best friend in
Oh,
writing that
cool.
little book
Well,
there.
that's great.
So yeah, it happened, I think, within like 3 months, maybe. And again, I
Wow.
wasn't sitting down every day.
Yeah.
I would sit down for like a few hours
Well,
every 2 or 3 weeks. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And then I would just write, write, write. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I like this idea. The book was actually supposed to be super thick. And then I'm like, let's start with a very skinny book. Let's see how it goes. Because
Yeah.
this is not like the book. This was a book for me to get out of my head and into becoming creative again. That's what that book was. That book was to teach me how to learn how to manifest intentionally.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Not
Right.
not without knowing what the hell I was doing.
Right. Right. It's
Yeah, yeah.
funny if
So,
I knew on the front end how much work it was and how long it would take and all, I probably would have been too intimidated to start. It was almost like there was some ignorance that was kind of blissful because it allowed it to be creative and kind of fun.
hmm
And okay, this seems interesting. And then you'd learn a little more as you went, and you didn't know enough to know how much further you had to go. But eventually, for me, I was so far along, it was like I'm not going to throw all that away and
yeah,
just give up. It's probably faster to get to the end than from where I started at the beginning. But it's a lot of
that
work.
is so true.
It gives you a lot of
Yeah,
gives
no,
you
no,
a lot of respect for when at least for me, when I'm reading fiction with authors that are doing amazing things and creating worlds, whether it's science fiction or fantasy, and how they'll develop characters or certain plot twists, and wow, I wouldn't have thought of that, or even how they'll phrase certain things or certain characters that they develop that have so much depth. And now I appreciate it because I realize that's freaking hard to do, at least for
yeah,
me it was. I
yeah,
enjoy fiction a lot more now, I think, as a result of having gone through the process of writing a novel.
yeah, no, for sure. You did an amazing job. I got to tell you that, and I'm not even done with the book yet. So far, I'm in there. I'm just like in my seat. I
Yeah.
don't want to move. 4, 5, 6, 7 chapters in. I'm like, I'm here.
Well, as it wears on, right, when you finish up, just fire me a note or something to let me know how you think it turned out.
Yeah, definitely. I will. Trust me. You'll hear from me. Now, what role does Buddhism play in your personal life and in the development of the story?
Okay, well, I guess in my personal life, I do. I try to spend as much a percentage of each day that I can being like you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about earlier at your retreat, being aware of what's my mind thinking, and and what is that thinking serve? Not trying to stop the thoughts, suppress the thoughts, but just being aware of them. And
Yeah.
and it's funny because oftentimes it's like, okay, I'm running through some imaginary dialogue I'm going to have with somebody that's potentially, has some conflict in it, and it's because I don't feel that they are, understanding me in a certain way, or I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z because it's really important that this particular aspect of my identity is solid,
Mm-hmm.
not challenged. And so, just seeing the mind going through its storytelling, it's trying to protect the identity of this Dave guy walking around, and just see where am I attached? What's pulling me in and causing these reactions, causing the mind to start spinning in certain ways, and just seeing that, and then suddenly, for me at least, I take it less seriously. I don't spend hours worrying about something. I think, okay, there's Dave's mind once again, trying to support the
Mm-hmm.
fact that he's a likable guy, or he's smart, or whatever it is that mind's trying to do. So it becomes
Yeah.
a practice, not just staring at the wall and watching the mind, but how can I watch what's going on while I'm engaged in life in general, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Now, the second part of the question had to do, I think, with how does Buddhism play a role in the book, right?
Yeah.
And really,
And, well, in the book and in your life too.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think in the book, I mean, Toby is going through a similar type of experience, right? And he's starting to
Right.
realize, okay, why is he suffering so much, right? Well, okay, he's kind of denying reality. He wants things that he doesn't have, or aspects of what's going on in his life he doesn't want. And so, he's starting to learn that he's creating this narrative where, we're all the hero kind of in our own story, and that hero can be positive or negative, but we're telling ourselves a narrative and a story. And now he's starting to realize, oh, so that's kind of what's going on upstairs, maybe, uh, and there's certain aspects of that story I'm attached to, and some that I'm resistant to. And then, starts to realize a little bit more about, oh, how much of what we're doing out there in life, we're achieving, is, is really kind of looking for distraction, or kind of running away from the essence
Mm.
of who we are, to try to build something that is a story we can live with, right? And then
Right.
he starts to eventually get to the point, with Eddie's help, of realizing that a spiritual journey isn't isn't necessarily attaining something else to add to who we are, to say, now I'm a spiritual person, and and I meditate,
Yeah.
and I say wise things, and here's these cool books I read. Yeah, that creates a spiritual ego. It's another story, just a different
Yes.
story that might seem a little cooler and more new agey to talk about, but really the process
Mm-hmm.
is a deconstructive process. What am I not? And, oh, maybe I'm not all these beliefs. Maybe I am not these thoughts that are these patterns that just run in my mind. Maybe I am what's kind of watching that. And so he starts to go through a deconstructive process. And in that, something's
Nice.
left over when we start to see, okay, here's these thoughts, these beliefs, these feelings, and these things come in, these kind of go, but what's always been there? What is it that animates that? What is watching that whole thing? And how does he break that identification with being this individual personality to being this awareness that's always there, animating the whole thing, right? And so that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how the process that's going on with him and his journey. And I would say that's very similar to my own process, and probably a lot of other people's process, as they continue to try to be a little more self-aware and understand themselves better, and maybe yeah start to become aware of the thoughts instead of believing they are their thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, we've been so programmed, by even religion and government and everything, that we have to go outside of ourselves to find, whatever it is, versus everything's inside of us already. And one of the things that actually helped me in my spiritual journey, when I tapped into it really, really deeply, was number one, I became aware of that spiritual ego very quickly. And I'm like, I'm not going there. And then the other one was that when you actually look at life, you step up outside of yourself, you're the observer, and then you realize, wait a second, I came into this world, I had a contract. I might not remember what it is, but my purpose to come here is to experience life, learn whatever I need to learn, and then just, that's it. Just be happy. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to take shit so freaking serious all the time. And then it hit me one day when my husband was like, well, I think everything in life is spiritual. And I was like, how do you take the life that we've been programmed to live, the Western crazy life, and put it together with the Easter and then kind of integrate it? And how do you become this spiritual human being? And you're going through this whole process in your spiritual journey. And then it's like, wait a second, I don't have to become anything. I am already that. All of it. Whatever I want to experience, whatever it is, it's in me. I am God's source creator. We're not different. We're not disconnected. We're not apart. And that's what they've taught us, and especially in religion.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to put anything down, but I've asked for many, many moons for truth to come about so many different things. And I've had so many truths come now, and I understand, okay, you know what? No wonder I never felt comfortable going into a church. Even like when I was raised Catholic, I would lean more towards shamanism on my grandmother's side than the Catholic. They wanted me to wear that pretty dress and do that a ceremony thing, and I was like, I'm not doing that shit. Like, that's not for what? What do I need to do that? I'm like 12 years old and fighting with my parents. I'm not doing that. And then it's like going to different churches and trying to find whatever, find truth, find peace. And I could never find any of it. I was always so confused. And I'm like, a lot of this shit really doesn't make sense to me. Like, what do you mean God in the Old Testament, God is evil and God will kill and God would do all these things. And then in the New Testament, Jesus and everything is love, but then there's still fear based and there's still this and there's still that. Like, I don't understand any of that shit. It doesn't make sense to me. So now I look back and I'm like, with everything I've been learning, I'm like, we're all, connected. We are connected to God. We're like the law of one, what they call is your, connection with God and nothing else. Like, you don't have to go anywhere else. You are that, so it became so much easier.
Yeah, it's interesting because once you get an institution, the institution is also trying to make decisions to preserve itself as an institution. And if part of that is that, well, you need this institution as a path to interact with whatever higher deity being or whatever, it creates a dependency on that institution, but it's not too empowering for the individual, right? And now most individuals haven't had heavy duty metaphysical experiences or whatnot. And so they're thinking, okay, well, that might be true. I haven't had any sort of personal experience of being one with the divine or whatnot. But yet at the same time, you're learning about through whatever lens, whatever religious institution is presenting through, or through whatever book.
Yeah.
And even if you get into Eastern philosophy and religion, spirituality, and non-dualism, I mean, we're still learning about it, but it's a mental exercise. And at some point, that raft can take you only to the other shore, but you got to get out of the raft and walk around to see what's there. So how do you transition from learning about and thinking about and having these thought constructs to being and actually experiencing being present in that totality that you're talking about, that we're a piece of this manifestation, but it doesn't feel like it sometimes, but it can.
Yeah.
And I think once someone has had that experience, whether it's through meditating or just watching their mind or whatnot, then it's like to your point, exactly. Aha. Yeah, I am that. This is, I am not just this little thing. I am a integrated piece of the fabric of all that is here. And I experienced that, not just thought about it, in the words that were dictated to me. And I think that so often we get addicted to the vehicle, to the the religion or the meditating or being spiritual. And in the end, it can take you so far, but then it becomes a trap. And how do you
Yeah.
let that go and surrender that?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then what's left? And hopefully what you can really experience who you are through being in the present, not through thinking.
Uh-huh.
That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
But
And yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And one of the things that I personally experienced through my own, spiritual journey is that there's steps. Everybody goes through different steps in that journey. And all of it is to kind of like awaken you. It's always to awaken you and to get you to where you need to get to, but there's really nowhere to get
yeah,
to because it's already inside of you. So it basically just kind of like opens up these portals inside of you.
mhm,
You know what I mean? And now you can see clearly, and I had to go through so many ups and downs and so many like little woo-woo things and, which were fun. And there's fun, I like to connect to my spirit guides and my ancestors. And I could do so many things now that I used to do when I was a kid, but then I kind of got away from all of that. And, society says, don't talk about that shit because, you're crazy. So you don't talk about it. Now it's like everybody's talking about it. There's no stopping this spiritual train anymore because everybody's talking about things, all their gifts.
yeah.
So it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. The whole process is, it's just, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, dude, that it's not, we can all be here for different reasons. I mean, I think we like to believe there's one
Yeah.
reason that we're here. And I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. I mean, it's hard to find purpose when you take a step back and realize how insignificant our teeny tiny little planet and solar system are to our own galaxy, let alone that's one of billions of galaxies. And the time is this eternal thing, and it takes a billion years just to even get across our galaxy at the speed of light. And you're thinking, okay, here's this one little tiny planet, and I'm the speck that you can't even see from outer space, and somehow what's going on in my life is critically important. If the planet got snuffed out, the universe almost wouldn't even notice, right? So any meaning and purpose is self-manufactured to try to give us some sort of anchor in what's going on. But how can you really take it that seriously? And if not, then it's like maybe you can laugh at it a little bit. And like you'd mentioned earlier, what if the point is just here we are and experience this, and it doesn't need to be any more than that. And it can be good experiences, it can be uh, harsh experiences, and but the fact is we're getting to experience something, and we're a part of that. And there could just easily
Yeah.
be nothing at all. I mean, so might as well enjoy this fast little trip and feel thankful that we got at least to be a part of it for a while, right?
Yeah. No, I am there. Yeah. I, coming from someone that had really severe mental health challenges, that wanted to get myself out of this world because
Yeah.
everything was just so, you know what I mean? So danced all the
Mhm.
time. Now, once I learned that whole age, you made a contract before coming in here. What the hell are you bitching and complaining about? Just remember what you got to remember, experience life, have a great time. Don't worry about the rest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that made it so much easier. I'm like, holy shit, I've wasted like 40 something years, 30 something years of my
Yeah.
life. Just, worrying about everything, being mad at everything, being in fear, crazy. That makes you sick.
Yeah.
It's not even worth it. It's not even worth it, man.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes being in that for long enough to eventually say, like you said, it's not worth it. I needed to feel
Yeah.
that pain, that discomfort, that anxiety, that depression enough to say, wow, I need to go a different direction here. If this is what it's all about, it, it's, it's kind of depressing. Can I just let it go? Yeah. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
that's hard.
Kind of like Toby's
Yeah.
story.
And
Yeah.
I think
Kind of like this. Yeah.
it's harder when things are going our way, though, right? I mean, say your
Mm-hmm.
podcast suddenly has 1 million viewers, and people want you on their podcast and TV shows, and there's all this positive affirmation, and then we start to get attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
and then that we build that into our identity of who we are, and then all of a sudden, oh, not as many people are watching our podcast, or somebody gave it a really crappy review, and now I'm reacting. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's yeah, uh, but it's like
Yeah.
to see it when things aren't going well and just be able to say let go and just kind of be like, oh well, it is. But then when things are going good, that would tend to pump us up to also be able to say, I'm not going to get too wrapped up in that either. And you start building a manufactured story about why I'm special or something. Yeah, how can you
Yeah.
how can you kind of be a little bit detached and be that observer at both the highs and the lows? And because
Mm,
if you're attached with
it's
one,
finding
you're
that
attached on
balance.
the other, right?
Yeah, yeah. You got to find that inner
Yeah.
balance, to kind of just stay in that humility, just kind of stay, balanced,
Yeah.
not one way, not the other, and I get it. I grew up in Miami. Everything was like, what are you wearing? What are you driving? How much money do you have? What kind of job, you have, all these things. And it's like, I look back now and I'm like, none of that shit matters. Like half of the people that I knew back then, talk to them. I don't talk to none of them.
Yeah.
Does it matter? It doesn't freaking matter. The people that you know now might stay around, might not.
Yeah.
So who gives a shit what people think? You know what I mean? As long as you're happy with yourself, screw everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah. Well, it doesn't mean that you're mean to people or I don't give a shit about you. It's like, no, I'm just meeting you.
No,
It's been great,
no.
and I know that this is temporary. Yeah, you may live in the same town as me for another 2 years or 2 months. You may move away. We keep in touch forever, or maybe not. Things are going to change no matter. Yeah, and that's got to be
They're
okay.
always changing. Yeah, things are always changing, and that's the beauty of life is change. You know? Yeah. So give me the backstory behind the nickname Old Hairy Jesus.
So, it started when I was leaving high tech, and I was moving out of San Francisco, and I decided I wasn't going to do it full time. Maybe I'd do some consulting or something like that. But I needed to, and I've been with the same company for a while. And I needed to have a personal email, right? And so, uh, yeah, I'm going through the Gmail options, and I type my name in, and it's taken, and then the first letter of my first name and my last name, and that's taken as recommending, D Holmes 7358 at Gmail. I'm like, no one's going to remember. So I start typing in all sorts of other things, and then at some point I just typed in Old Harry Jesus. And was like, oh, that's available. And I'm like, what? All right, so now I'm Old Harry Jesus at gmail.com. Yeah, and so then I'm sending emails to people and friends and stuff like that with this new email, and people thought that was pretty funny. And so then, a lot of my friends just started calling me Old Harry Jesus or OHJ, and that just kind of stuck to some degree. And so then I decided, well, that'd be a funny pen name for a funny book. It's supposed to be a spoof anyway, and so I ended
Mm-hmm.
up using that as a pen name.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Now, how does humor help convey spiritual lessons to your audience?
Um, I think it keeps it light, at a high level, right? I think that you know Toby's going through what could arguably be a number of painful experiences, but yet they're funny
Uh-huh.
experiences as well. And the scenes he finds himself are funny, and I think it kind of sheds a little bit of light on the absurdity of life in general and what we get wrapped around the axle, like much of what you were just eloquently speaking of there. And so I think it it creates a safe place for people to philosophically be introspective, because it's not a really heavy environment. You're reading some book and it's talking about all the pain and angst that's going to be caused if you get too attached to this. And you're like, oh my God, like you're laughing being in a frame of mind for me where I'm seeing humor in things also creates an openness and a receptiveness to maybe looking at something a different way, or being able to
Mm,
accept a new psychological or philosophical point that maybe I normally wouldn't, because I'm in a safe, enjoyable, relaxed state of mind. And so hopefully
right.
it creates an environment that the reader feels safe and lighthearted and open, and then maybe some of what's being discussed with Toby and Eddie, resonates, then maybe it wouldn't have possibly. Some people have said that's the case, and that it was their experience. I'm sure maybe not everybody, depending on how open you want to be to kind of shine a flashlight on what's going on inside your mind. We don't always want to see those things, but you don't
Yeah.
have to. You can just get lost in the story too. So it
Yep.
uh, provides that as well.
No, thank you for that. I love it. Very well, said. It gives me, for me as the reader and an author myself, a different idea of even for, like, I was saying earlier, I'm going to write my memoir, and I'm thinking, well, I've had an incredible life. A lot of crazy things has happened. And I'm thinking, well, a lot of the people that write their memoirs, it's always so like doom and gloom and like life is happening to me. And I get it. That's part of what the story was at that time.
Mhm.
But then, the idea you gave me is like I could add a twist of humor to that, which I don't know how I'm going to do that yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to like really tap back into you. But it gives me a different idea of, yeah, you could give people your life story, but make it in a way where not only is it going to keep them engaged, but it's not so like sad and depressed and, people are trying to feel sorry for you, which is the old programming that we've been getting out of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now we are bringing in a different way of seeing someone's autobiography, memoir, whatever, in a different light, which is still inspiring, it's still loving and amazing, and it has all real life stories, but you're giving it a different light, a different energy,
No, that's
which I really, really love. And I'm so grateful that you did that because it really shines the light on seeing life differently. You know what I mean? I think it's pretty creative.
well,
Pretty
it
creative.
feels good to hear that. You like to think, yeah, what if humor could be a profound tool, right, for philosophical exploration, uh, and
Mm-hmm.
entertain you as well as maybe challenge our perceptions, and encourage us to kind of reflect on life's complexities. I think it's not. Some people might want something much more heavy, much more serious, because with that, I think sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they view that as maybe more credible or whatnot. But I think for a lot of people that haven't ever been exposed to
Yeah.
any sort of Eastern psychology or religion at all, it's a pretty painless way to put your toe in that water and not really have to give anything up along the way to do so.
True, true. That's a different way of looking at it. That's yeah, pretty cool. Now, what was the most enlightening lesson you learned during your PhD in humility studies in Silicon Valley?
Well, um, it's interesting because for me personally, yeah, I was running a team that supported the sales team, but yet ultimately, what our revenue was quarter to quarter, if we're hitting our targets or not, really defined if we were popular or unpopular within the company, and you're only as
Right,
good as the last quarter of what the sales team's results are, right? And if the sales team's not doing a good job for multiple quarters, now we're suddenly the company's laying people off. And then you're really unpopular, right? Because as other departments that are
right,
building products and then getting laid off because salespeople can't sell them. But then you're having really good quarters and you're crushing your numbers and the company's stock is going up and the employees that have stock are happy because now they're they built something that's worth something to them and maybe they can put a deposit on a house someday or whatever it happens to be. So
right,
it made me realize you're getting popped up and feeling good, like you're controlling things when things are going well, and the next thing you know, stuff happens out of the blue that you don't have any control over, and things are going crappy, and then you're a piece of crap, right? And it
right.
really it helped me to realize how fast things can change, how temporary things are, and how nobody's as good as they appear at their best or as bad as they appear at their worst. And
Hmm.
so it in some ways, in some you know, backhanded way, I mean, taught me a certain amount of compassion, I think, along the way, uh, and helped me develop a little bit of compassion for myself too, not hold myself too accountable to things
Hmm.
that I don't have control over. And it's okay to be helpless in
Yeah.
certain situations too, because it can work in your favor or not. I mean, a lot of times people accidentally have a lot of good things happen too. It's not just bad things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Uh, so
yeah. That's true. Yeah, that's true. It's funny because I had learned a while back that if there's a situation, let's say a really crazy doom gloom situation, and they say if you take a step back, take a breath, wait a few minutes, and see if anything changes, things always change. So in 5, 10 minutes, whatever you were upset at or whatever was happening or whatever the situation is, now it doesn't really matter anymore. If you just step back, let things be, and say, was it that really important? Like, did I have to like really like, get all crazy about this situation because maybe, like you said, the company stock went up or went down or whatever. If you're just like saying, oh, okay, well, shit happens, life goes on, just kind of like, and we need to do that as human beings because we're so like, oh my God, the company is laying off people. Oh my God, the world is over. I'm losing my job. And then you're going down this scenario in your head.
Yeah.
And then you know what? Then you could lose your job. And then that was the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is funny how
Yeah.
what's happening might seem good or bad in the present, but then it,
Mm-hmm.
you fast forward a year or two and look back, and what you thought was good that was going on might have been the worst thing potentially, or vice versa. I mean,
Yeah.
it is really hard to tell when life's not going our way. Is it maybe going in a better way, and we're just kind of dug in and holding on to how we think it should be going? Uh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it is always hard to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. We're always trying to control everything, right?
Yeah, because we're taught that we should be able to control everything and we can do whatever we want. We should be able to do whatever we want, and the sky is the limit. And we have unending opportunity. And then we feel like if things aren't going well, it's completely our fault. And what should I be controlling to make sure that things go the way I want? But we're not taught too much to sit back and kind of watch how things are going. And I mean, sure, you act and you do things, but to part of it too is accepting change, and change is happening so much faster now than it ever has. At the technology level, the
Oh,
medical
yeah.
level, this scientific level, and I, you have to accept it. I mean, it's not like
You have
back in the
to.
dark ages where your dad was a blacksmith and his dad was a blacksmith, and you're going to be a blacksmith, and how you blacksmith is exactly the same as it was 200 years ago. I mean, not much changed at all. Maybe it's quite boring as hell, actually, come to think about it. But now it's just like this rocket ship of change. Yeah, you're like, holy shit, I can't even integrate the last change, and things are changing again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I love changes now. I'll be like, oh, what else is changing? What's next? Like, wait a second, this is fun. And I remember like even during COVID, like, I live in the mountains of North Georgia, so a small little town. And you go to a restaurant and then you're waiting and waiting and they don't have people working. They just people decided, you know what? I'm not gonna work for anybody again, like myself included, and then you're going and you're having to be patient and you gotta be compassionate because you have maybe 3 waitresses for 40, 50 people, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? And that's crazy. But there's a lot to learn there too, because then you'll hear some people getting really mad at the waitress or the cook or this. And it's like, no, dude, it's time to have compassion. It's time to really say, you know what? Things are shifting, they're changing. It cannot always be our freaking way. You know what I mean? Can we just step us outside of our own ego and see somebody else for once?
it's a good point. It is funny. You mentioned COVID, and it seemed that you talk to a lot of people, especially people that work in service industries, like at restaurants. And when people started going back out again, I heard so many times, how come people are so rude and so frustrated and so this and so that? And it makes you wonder, well, when people almost disengaged from society, did they lose a certain amount of compassion and become more self-centered, and things are more myopic? And sure, fear tends to bring that out in us, and there's a lot of uncertainty and fear during COVID
Mm-hmm.
and all. Uh, and you hope that things are going to start to migrate at least back to a little bit more the way they were before, and people make allowances before they make judgments and things of that sort when
Mm-hmm.
dealing with other people. But I've heard the very same thing that you just articulated with how people be
Yeah.
ridiculously rude and not even bothering to think about what someone else's situation, and maybe they're doing the best that anyone could do.
Oh yeah, yeah. I even saw like when was it last week in Walmart? I'm like walking, I'm leaving Walmart, and there's a guy in front of me, and there's 2 older people in front of him, and they're walking slow, and he's like looking back at me like, and then we walk out, and the old people, of course, they're going, their way very slowly, and he turns around, and he's like, why do people have to walk so slow? Why can't they just walk out? And I said, well, sometimes, we get to a certain age in life that we just walk slow, and we just got to be patient. He thought I was going to like, entertain where he was at in his energy. And I was like, no, you came to the wrong person because I'm always going to twist it to something positive. And he just looked at me and said, okay, have a nice day. Walked away.
Yeah, this conversation is not working out for me. Better move on.
Yeah, but it's so funny because even I get tested, in my own journey, and I could see it now. I'm so aware, and I'm just like, no, I'm not falling into that trap again. Screw that. I'm not falling into that.
That's a funny thing. Yeah, you feel like you're calm and you feel like you're centered and you feel like, yeah, okay, I'm meditating and being self-aware. And then you're driving along, telling the person in front of you, screaming through the windshield to hurry the hell up. And why are they going so slow? Why did they signal? You're like, oh, isn't that interesting? Maybe I'm not quite as centered as I wanted to believe that I was. I guess I got all these ideas about how
Uh,
everyone else should be driving that maybe don't align with reality at all. Oh, I'm pissed. Yeah.
mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. I get it. Now, what has been the most rewarding part of sharing your story with the world?
Um, that's a good question. I think that I viewed it as here's a funny way for people to engage in maybe a journey of self discovery if they wanted to. And the most rewarding part, though, is I've had a few different people early on that read the book that knew me and called me up and said, "Hey, this was exactly the book that I needed right now. I can't believe that you happened to write that and it fell into my hands." And I was like, "Well, I mean, it feels good to hear, obviously, but you're wondering, well, why?"
Yeah,
And what those people had in common is that they were going through some significant changes in their life, sometimes voluntary, sometimes not.
right,
And one
right.
person had just moved out of a relationship had fallen apart, and their job as well, and so they were having all these reactions similar to Toby's reactions, but yet it gave them
Yeah,
some different perspective too to watch kind of how they went through that they found was very, very helpful for them at that time. And I thought to
nice.
myself, I remember the first time that I got a call from someone that had said that, and I thought, you know what, if nothing else, if that person who I care about happened to, get a little bit of something that could help them out or provide them, some comfort at a time in their life where things were hard, then I don't care if anyone else buys the thing. I mean, it helps somebody, and I didn't necessarily think that. I mean, I thought it may, but it actually did, and that felt really rewarding. It felt good.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, are you planning on writing any other books, any other topics, anything in the future?
I don't know. I think in order to do so, I would have to be very excited about the idea of what that story would be like, what those characters would be like, because there's a lot of work, and you want to feel like you're passionate about it, right? I mean, so I would definitely like to,
Right.
but I need to spend some time really kind of considering what might that be. Would it be a similar type of book? Would it be something totally different? And all, but I imagine at some point I probably will, when the time's right, and I know exactly what it is I want to write, but it's not as easy as you would think when authors are writing 50, 60, 70, 80 books. There's endless supply of creativity. Yeah, I think for me, it's got to be more than just a story, I guess. And
Mm,
and how to do that, I think, requires a little bit of thought.
yeah. Who knows? Maybe you'll do a Netflix series.
Yeah, maybe, maybe.
I'm so hopeful for that one. Oh, now Dave, we're coming to the end of our show, and I'd like to ask three questions. Question number one: if readers take away one profound truth or lesson from your book, what will you hope it to be?
I would think that would be remember that who you are is a story that you create and that you tell yourself, for better or for worse. But it's only that. It's a story. And don't make it more than that. It doesn't have to be. It can be simple, and it can be lighthearted. And don't take it too serious because
Beautiful.
it will change whether you want it to or not.
Yeah, true, very true. Now, how do you personally define enlightenment, and how does the vision shape your life and writing?
That's a really good question. And I guess for me, it can only relate it to my experience, right? And I think for
Right.
me, it is when I am present and engaged with whatever is around me, but yet not from a thinking perspective, but just feeling like I'm a part of this thing happening, right? This fabric of the universe, and feeling totally connected to that and a part of that, and um and just being very, very aware and in that process. And that comes and goes, right? It can happen a higher and higher percentage of the time, and there's things that trigger that or trigger the opposite of that. But no, for me, it's knowing that there's this place of awareness that sits behind the whole thing, and that it's possible to play in that space. And but it definitely takes practice. And so, what are the things that are getting in the way of that, the attachments or the reactions or the beliefs? And how can I identify more and more of those and spend a greater amount of time in that space of observing and being conscious, as opposed to getting kind of spun around within my own thoughts?
Mm, nice. So, okay, I guess that will probably answer question number three, because it was more like, in the moments of self-doubt, what practices or philosophies ground you and reconnect you to your purpose?
Yeah, I find, I mean, we all have doubts about ourselves from time to time, and those come and they go, but they're just like thoughts too. And realizing, and it seems a little easier as we get older, because we can reflect on all the times we were run by self doubt that we didn't need to be, or that ultimately it didn't matter, and that things were okay. And so, I'll see, that creeping in, and I'll catch myself and go, okay, there's Dave's, doubtful self, or, worried about worst case scenarios, and it's happening, and those thoughts are being thunk, and they'll pass. They always do. Yeah. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen, but just kind of watching it happen, like you're watching, a wave crest come up and then go back down into the ocean. Um, doesn't mean you have to react to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that message. That was pretty cool.
Uh,
So, as we wrap up today's episode of the Dear Souls podcast, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our guest for sharing his insights and experiences. If you found value in our conversation, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your friends. Your support helps us to continue bringing inspiring guests to the show, and together we can inspire more souls on their journey to healing and growth. Stay connected with us for more transformative stories and insights. Until next time, keep sharing your light. And Dave, before we leave, I wanted where can people find you?
sure. Uh, well, I've got a website that's just www.oldharryjesus.com, and it talks about the book, and there's links to Amazon. You can find the book on Amazon, but you have to go in the books category, because of the title, Zen and the Art of Anal Bleaching. It's an adult book, and you can't pull it up from the general search. So, but there's links on my website to it. You can go into the books category, and you can look up Old Harry Jesus, or Google Old Harry Jesus, or the name of it, and find it. Or if you want to send a note, my email is oldharryjesus@gmail.com, and I'll definitely respond.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. I've had a great time on this podcast, and hopefully we'll do another one
Oh,
next
well,
year.
thank you for having me on. This has been a joy. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.